Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's no ladies watching this. Gentlemen of the YouTube, I need your assistance. As you probably recall, if you've been following along for some time, I picked up a barn find, literal, not clickbait. It is a 1987 325E. So it does have the 2.7 smog motor that only revs to, I think it's 4,200 RPM. Let's take a peek. Okay, 45. I was told that this motor runs, but in pure NLR fashion, poor wimpy smog motor that makes next to no power is not going to suffice. So I am coming to you guys with requiring a little bit of advice. The plan for this vehicle in particular is going to be a bit of an OEM build or OE plus build. I don't want it anything crazy. I don't want it to be a nuts track car. We don't have any tracks here. I don't want it to be a drift car. I just want it to be simple. My blue one was a little bit overkill. I want this to be a little bit more tame. So plans are to ditch the 2.7 and put some sort of a motor swap in it. So I need advice from those of you that have been following along as to what motor we're gonna put in. Option one is going to be the N54 out of my 135. That beautiful automobile sitting in behind here with the roof rack and the winter tires. Yep. But I do have the N54 that came out of it. Now this one here, if you've been watching the build, the oil filter housing, we did end up starting to swap the turbos initially for a buddy of mine, but as soon as I opened the oil filter housing, it was full of material. Now the type of material is something you definitely don't want to see. Not only was it stripper glitter, it was bearing material. So this engine itself will need a refresh in the least. I would do rod bearings, complete overhaul, refresh, and thoughts were to take this engine and drop it into this automobile. Now I think this one here may be a little bit too much for the E30 chassis. It's gonna be multiple steps above in technology, but I almost think that it may ruin the character that the E30 has. It may be too much. It'll be very easy to make power. The drivability will be fantastic. And even 300 wheel out of this thing will make the E30 move quite good. The motor overall isn't in that bad of a shape. It's just been neglected. So I would reseal it. So valve cover, I'd probably either confirm if this one was good, just to ensure that I'm not gonna have any surprises. With that comes cost. The E30 itself has the Getrag 260 manual transmission, but I don't believe it will actually adapt to the N54. So I'm gonna have to reinvent the wheel. There's gonna be a lot of cost involved if I wanted to put the N54 in, including sourcing a manual transmission for rear wheel drive, and also needing to figure out if I can use a factory DME or if I need to convert it to a standalone. As you can kind of see, there's gonna be a lot of custom fabrication, which will be okay, as I do have access to a good buddy of mine that's a welder, but also the turbos. So the E30 is, needless to say, it doesn't have a ton of space, so we would have to figure something out with the turbos, either factory twins, because they're gonna be compact, using the factory coolant pipe or coolant bone, I don't know what they call them on these, just to keep it a really compact package, nice and close to the block, and figure something out. If I end up using the stock twins, as a lot of you will know, they run off of vacuum. So they default with the wastegate open, and then with vacuum, it pulls them shut. So what I would likely do is have them shut, tack weld them, and then somehow integrate an external wastegate that would be rerouted down to the downpipes. It would be a hell of a build, but I think it's too much. So that's option one. Option two will be this one right here. So what we have here is an M20 B25 engine that came out of the 325i. So remember, this is a 325e. This is from a 325i. Main differences is, again with the numbers, this is a 2.5 liter. And what came in the E30 is the smog 2.7 liter. The noticeable differences with this will be the cylinder head. So it does flow a fair bit more, including the intake manifold, the throttle body, and one thing to note is the pistons. The pistons have a valve relief to work very well with this cylinder head. So some people do put this cylinder head onto the 2.7, and it's called a 2.7 stroker. But rather than going from the 120, 150, it's documented with the right setup, you'll get about 190 crank out of this engine here, and they do end up sharing a lot of parts between the two of them. Essentially, you have two major options. Is a cost-effective one is to take this cylinder head and simply drop it on there. It will lower the compression to where you can put a turbo on it. Or if you want to go a few steps above that, you can take the pistons out of this engine here. And I have to confirm because the rods are about 2 millimeters difference in length. But you take the pistons out of this, you put them in the 2.7, you'll use the 2.7 crank with the 325i cylinder head and all of the top end and stuff. You'll use the ECU, you can still turbo it, but you end up bumping the compression a fair bit. Now a lot of people are getting about 170 something to 190 to the wheels with an NA setup. I'm leaning towards this one simply for the fact that this would be more of a period correct build. It's going to be a somewhat unique 2.7 stroker, again mix match between the two, and because it's going to have the same engine, it'll retain the Getrag 260. I don't have to do anything crazy with the clutch, simply just find a single mass flywheel, a clutch that will actually hold up to the abuse that I probably won't ever put it through, but this would be the cheapest option. Now, along with the cheapest option, I do have many parts. As you can see, all of the totes in behind the E30. So I should, for the most part, have everything required already to complete this engine swap. That being said, we would end up taking the block, tearing it down. You have to deck the block, I believe it's 2 millimeters if you use the 325i pistons, but at the end of the day, decent compression. I can use OEM parts. You can still turbo it in the event that I want, but it'll be an NA screamer that'll rev to about 75. So pretty decent option. That will be less power than the N54 option, but it will also be extremely simpler to use, build, and very cost effective. Another option I have that has popped up in the middle of nowhere in BC, somewhere north of Vancouver and south of Alaska-ish. They are selling, I believe it's an E28 524 turbo diesel. Now, if you don't know much about those, the turbo diesel is essentially going to be an inline six. It's a 2.4 liter. Engine code is M21D24. So 2.4 liter. Inline six, turbo diesel. In 87, they end up going to, I believe it's an electric assisted injection pump. So for the most part, it's gonna be pretty straightforward. It's gonna be pretty mechanical. You're still at the point where you can adjust the fueling and the fuel pin. So the pin will end up having a taper depending on how much fuel you want at a certain RPM. You can still adjust it and it's gonna be a full car. If I do go down this route, the price is right, it's in the middle of nowhere, and I do have a way to get it here. The only issue is I would be purchasing it sight unseen. It would be extremely difficult to get parts. However, all of that I can ignore and accept for the simple fact I will have a full parts car that had run 2 years ago. So I have the entire engine harness for it. I have all of the solenoids. I do have an automatic transmission, but it will bolt up to the Getrag 260. So this is another kind of interesting build that I really am intrigued with for the, again, simple fact that I love turbo diesels. And the fact that it's turbo and mechanical, and it would roll coal and be amazing to drive, I think it might end up tearing up this chassis a little bit. Because if you know these E30s, even moderately well, you'll know that the chassis is pretty weak. So the front strut towers you'll have to reinforce. Generally, you can end up getting a strut tower brace and end up holding it together. But for the rear sway bar, there's a fair bit of reinforcement that needs to be done. And again, I can't leave it stock. So it comes with, you know what? We'll go over the stats afterwards. But it comes with, I believe, 115 horsepower and just shy of 200 foot-pounds. Now, there are a lot of people that end up modifying them to get 180 to 200 horsepower to the wheels, which in turbo diesel fashion would equate to about 300 foot-pounds. 300 foot-pounds in a car that weighs sub, what, 2,700 pounds is an absolutely amazing power to weight. The torque will get it up and going, but one of the concerns is the rear diff. So I may end up needing to swap it out. Again, 410 rear diff, really short gears, but it has an LSD. Loading it up in second gear, skipping third, rolling to fourth, and then matting it and getting that cloud like a Cummins while it idles like a tractor and still gets 40 miles per gallon. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I guess to recap, I have the N54 E82. It's gonna make a fair bit of power. I'm still going to attempt to get 700 horsepower. Between me, you, and the 4 other people watching this video, I will try to get 700 to the wheels, but 700 HP is to the motor. So bear with me if it's shy of being 1,000 horsepower. I'm working with what I've got. So what do you guys think? Which motor would you end up wanting to go with? I really would appreciate, and I always do appreciate, your guys' opinion. Would you go with the M20 B25/27 stroker motor? Again, this one's gonna be about, with a chip, 190, 200 horsepower, potentially to the wheels. It retains the 5-speed transmission, and it ends up being a pretty period correct OE plus build, where I won't have to do a whole hell of a lot. This will also be the cheapest. Aside from machining and so forth, this would be one of the ones I'm leaning towards. Again, love the N54, but what do you guys think? I would like to have an N54 in it, but at the same time, I think it would end up ruining the character and the heritage behind the E30, and I'm not completely certain on it, but again, it would be pretty sweet, and I think it would be a pretty unique build. This would result in more power than I would ever need for the car. So for the most part, it would do 300, 350 to the wheels pretty easily, but this is also the most expensive build if we decided to go that route. Love the motor, hate the cost. Or would you guys want to go with the M21 diesel? Again, risks involved. It would be sight unseen, and it would be trucked in from somewhere in BC, but we would have a parts car, so I'd have to rip apart an older classic car that's in decent shape for parts to fix my classic car in less than decent shape. Yeah, 3 pretty unique, decent stages that this vehicle could be built with, but yeah, we'll open a poll. Whatever ends up winning, I'll definitely take into consideration and see what happens. We're gonna be bringing you some 1 Series content this winter. It does have winter tires and it is somewhat winter ready and so forth for the impending doom that you can see. Yep, it's snowing and I'm still in shorts. We're prepping for winter. We're gonna get some projects on the go. I don't plan to have this door open very much. But along with having fun with the 1 Series, we're definitely gonna get chipping away at the 3 Series. We will be waiting on parts, machining, and so forth with this one. So I have technically an unofficial 4th option, which can be included in any of the first 3. I do have 1989 Honda. I know. I should have warned you to be sitting before I gave you the news. So if you've fallen over, pick yourself up and off the floor. But I do have 1989 Honda CRX with a B16B swap. It is an older drag build, so it is sub 1,800 pounds. Carbon hood, carbon hatch, Lexan windows, completely gutted interior. You could literally look from the rear through the taillight keyhole all the way to the front and see the engine. It's extremely light, it's unique. It has sat for some time, but it does run, drive, and it only needs a bit of a refresh and an exhaust. So along with these, would you guys be interested if I decided to bring a Honda onto the channel? Throwing a wrench in the works, but if there's enough interest, I'll definitely bring it over. I'll definitely make room in the cave, whatever we're calling this place, the workshop, the shop, the whatever. If it'd be of interest to you guys, let me know, again, down in the comments. We can do 2 projects at once. Primary is the E30, finding out what engine we're gonna put in, and if there's enough interest, maybe a Honda CRX. That's all for today, guys, and maybe 3 ladies. Take care. See you on the next one. Good motor. They are good. Just dumb owners who neglect them. But they are expensive, and I didn't bring my wallet, so I'm gonna slip away very quietly and slowly before I get accosted for more dollar bills. Okay, I love you, bye.